Welcome to my Bard story.
And thank you for joining us. We're diving deep again, this time into, well, the very beginning. Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 25.
Yeah, these are such foundational words, aren't they? They really set the scene for everything else in the Bible.
They absolutely do. The origin of the cosmos, God's character revealed right from the start, our place in it all. It's huge.
And we've got some great notes here drawing on, a range of scholars and commentators to help us unpack it.
That's the plan. We'll dig into the language, the context, the theology, maybe find some insights that surprise you or give you a fresh angle on a passage you thought you knew really well.
So not just what God did, but the how and the why. What these verses tell us about God and his world.
Exactly. According to the perspectives in our notes. Yeah, let's jump in.
Okay, let's turn to our study note then. Genesis 1, verse 1 from the NIV. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Okay, right off the bat, that first verse, the notes describe it as more than just a simple statement. It's like this majestic, summarizing declaration, a formal introduction almost.
Like a title for the whole creation account.
Yeah, sort of, declaring God's creative power and his, supreme authority over everything.
And the notes point out some key Hebrew words here. In the beginning, bereshit. What's the significance there?
Bereshit. It's really interesting. Some scholars, like Sailhammer and Walton, they suggest it refers to the beginning of this created universe, of time as we know it.
Not God's beginning, because he's eternal.
Exactly. It sets a starting point for the cosmic order we're about to see unfold. But then others like Wenham and Sarna point out grammatically it can just mean in the beginning, full stop, an absolute starting point.
Okay.
And what's really key is how it works with the verb created, bereshit. It's in a form, the katal, that many scholars, Sarna, Walton, Wenham are mentioned, see as making verse 1 a summary or title for the whole account.
So not necessarily the very first action chronologically, but the overarching truth.
Precisely. It's like saying, here's the headline, God created everything. Then verses 2 onwards detail how he ordered and filled it over the days. It frames the whole narrative.
That does change how you read it. Okay, then God, Shem. It's plural, but the verb created is singular. That seems odd.
It does look odd in English, yeah. But the notes explain, citing Waltke and Ross, that this is a common Hebrew thing, a plural of majesty or intensity.
Like the royal we.
Exactly like that. It emphasizes God's greatness, his fullness of power. Using Eilshim throughout Genesis 1 stresses his transcendence, his power as the creator, distinct from his covenant name Yahweh, which comes later.
And the notes mention it leaves room for later Trinitarian understanding.
Well, yeah, Gangel and Brammer and Waltke suggest that. It's not teaching the Trinity here, obviously, but the grammar plural noun, singular verb, it kind of hints at a complexity within the Godhead, doesn't it? A richness within the one God.
Interesting. Okay, the main verb, created, baro. Our notes say this word is special, used only for God.
That's a really crucial point, yeah. Ross, Waltke, Sarna all highlight this. Bar isn't just making something, it's about a divine act, bringing something completely new, perfect into existence, something humans can't do.
Like creation out of nothing, creatio ex nihilo.
It strongly implies it. The verse doesn't explicitly say out of nothing, but the context, God just speaks. There's no mention of pre-existing materials, leads scholars like Von Rad, Gangel, and Brammer, Wenham to see it that way. Westerman adds, it emphasizes God's creation is effortless, completely free.
So total sovereign power.
Totally. Though Walton, with his functional view, might say, bara here emphasizes God giving the universe its order and function, making it work as a cosmos.
Oh, okay.
And the notes also contrast bara with angar, a more general word for made or did used later. Bar seems to mark the really significant new stages of creation, like animal life and humans.
Got it. And finally, the heavens and the earth.
Right. That's a figure of speech called a merism. Ross, Waltke, Sarna explain this. You use two opposites, heavens and earth, to mean absolutely everything in between.
The whole cosmos.
The whole shooting match, yeah. The entire organized universe, visible and invisible. Everything that exists.
Wow. So verse 1 is just loaded. It establishes God's sovereignty, the origin of everything, and as the notes say, it immediately pushes back against polytheism or pantheism.
Absolutely. One God, the source of all. It's the theological bedrock for the whole Bible.
Okay, let's move to verse 2. This describes the state before God starts ordering things. Now the earth was formless and empty, darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters.
Yeah, the notes call this a circumstantial clause, setting the scene for verse 3. It's the initial condition, the raw material, if you like, before God's work begins.
Formless and empty, tu abushu. It sounds so desolate, almost like chaos.
It does sound stark, and scholars like Sailhammer, Walt K. Ross describe it as, unproductive, uninhabited, disordered. Tu means unformed. Bushu means empty, lacking shape, lacking inhabitants.
Which is exactly what God fixes in the next days, right?
Yeah.
Forming in days 1 to 3, filling in days 4 to 6.
Exactly. Hughes points that out. But, and this is important, scholars like Sarna and especially Walton argue Tu Huobhu isn't necessarily evil chaos, like in some other ancient myths.
Oh.
Walton argues it's primarily non-functional. It lacks order, purpose, inhabitants, but it's not necessarily a hostile force God has to fight. It's just unformed potential.
That's a different feel. Not overcoming evil, but initiating order.
Okay.
And darkness was over the surface of the deep.
Darkness symbolizes that lack of order, the absence of light and life. The deep Tohom refers to the primordial cosmic ocean covering everything.
And the notes mention a connection to Tiamat in Babylonian myth.
Right, Tohom is related linguistically. But Genesis, crucially, demythologizes it. Tohom here isn't a chaos monster goddess. It's just the unorganized waters, totally under God's control, waiting for his command. Westerman and Sarna emphasize that.
So, no cosmic battle needed.
Hmm.
Got it. Then that amazing image. The Spirit of God was hovering over the waters.
Ruchim. Yeah, powerful. Ruchum can mean spirit, wind, or breath. There's some debate.
Like maybe just a mighty wind?
Some scholars, like von Rad apparently, suggest that. A wind God uses to control the waters. Walton leans that way too, emphasizing God's tool. But most scholars cited in our notes, Wenham, Sailhammer favor Spirit of God. It suggests God's dynamic, powerful, creative presence is already there, poised for action.
And hovering Mara.
That verb is fascinating. Its only other use is in Deuteronomy 32, describing an eagle hovering protectively over its young.
Oh, wow, like nurturing protective care.
Exactly. Suggests care, readiness, imminent life-giving action. Westerman, Sarna, Hughes all point this out. So even in this dark, watery, unformed state, God's powerful presence is there, in control, ready to transform. Gaengel and Bramer note this.
Okay, verse 3. The action begins. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
Here we go. God starts ordering through his word. And God said, "Wishemer Ilshim." That phrase repeats 10 times in the chapter. It emphasizes creation flows directly from God's personal will and command.
The word itself is creative.
Inherently creative, yeah. Powerful and effective, as Ross notes. What God speaks happens. The notes call this a key verb form driving the narrative.
And the first command, let there be light.
Right. Primordial light. And this is the famous puzzle, right? Light on day 1, but the sun, moon, stars aren't made until day 4.
So what is this light?
Good question. The notes offer possibilities. Maybe general cosmic energy. Perhaps God's own glorious presence, his Shekinah glory, as Gaengel and Bramer and Ross suggest.
Or function.
Yeah, Walton argues its function is primary, establishing the basis for time and order by separating light from darkness. Theologically, of course, light is huge, symbolizing life, joy, God's presence, contrasting with the darkness of verse 2.
So physical light, theological symbol, functional principle. Maybe all of the above.
Could be. Scholars differ, but the key is God commands it.
And instantly.
Yeah.
And there was light. Wehior.
Yes. That fulfillment formula, it shows the immediate, effortless power of God's word. Wenham and Sarna highlight this. It's a variant of, and it was so, Weidian, which appears 7 times. God speaks, reality conforms, instantly.
Verse 4. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness.
First divine approval, God saw that it was good, Keon. This phrase gets repeated 7 times. It's really significant.
What does good mean here? Just nice.
More than nice. The notes say it means perfect, fitting its purpose, beneficial. Sailhammer argues it specifically means beneficial for humanity, which is an interesting take we'll come back to. But fundamentally, it means creation is inherently good, reflecting God's nature, refuting any idea it's flawed or evil from the start. It works exactly as intended.
And then the separation.
Battle. Separation is a key creative act here, establishing order and boundaries. Westerman and Wenham stress this. God creates the distinction between light and darkness, the foundation for day and night.
He's imposing structure.
Exactly, showing his sovereignty over both. And notice, only the light is explicitly called good. suggesting a preference.
Verse 5, God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day.
Naming. In the ancient world, naming was an act of authority, defining something's essence and function. Ross, Wenham, Sarna all point this out.
So by naming day, Yom, and night, Layla, God is claiming lordship over time itself.
Absolutely. Well, Walton stresses the functional aspect, establishing the light period and dark period.
And then the closing formula for the day.
And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. That refrain marks the end of each of the first 6 days. Evening and morning signify a complete cycle.
Now, the word day, Yom, doesn't mean a literal 24 hours.
That's the big debate, isn't it? Many scholars, like Ross and Hughes, argue that Yom with a number, first day, literally one day, Yomiad, and the evening-morning formula strongly suggests a literal 24-hour period, setting a pattern for human life.
But not everyone agrees.
No. Others, like Walton and Sailhamer, see day possibly representing a longer period of God's creative work, or as a functional or literary marker, not strictly chronological 24-hour units. The notes mention the Jewish tradition starts the day at sunset, but Westerman says the focus here is just the completed cycle. Yomia, one day, establishes the sequence. It's a crucial point with big implications.
Definitely. Okay, day 2, verse 6. And God said, let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water.
God continues ordering the watery chaos of verse 2. He commands a vault rakia. This means an extended surface, a firmament.
Like a dome. That's how ancient people often pictured the sky, right?
Exactly. A&E cosmologies often saw it as a solid dome holding back waters above. The crucial function stated here is separation, to separate water from water.
Waters above from waters below.
Right. Ross and Sailhamer note this. Waters above, source of rain, clouds, celestial ocean. Waters below equates terrestrial waters. This separation creates the space for life.
And the word rakia itself.
It comes from a root meaning hammered or spread out, which does suggest solidity, as Sarna and Wenham note, though some translate it expanse or just sky. Walton, again, focuses on function, establishing atmospheric functions like weather cycles.
So whether it's a solid dome or just the sky, its job is separation.
Precisely. The function is key.
Verse 7. So God made the vault and separated the waters under the vault from the waters above it, and it was so.
The command is executed. God made asha. Remember, that's the more general verb for making or doing. Here, it signifies the accomplishment.
The separation happens.
Yes, distinct water realms are established. Crucial step. And the fulfillment formula, and it was so, Wehayan confirms it happened exactly as commanded. The notes mention a slight textual variant here between Hebrew and Greek texts on placement, but the meaning is clear.
Verse 8. God called the vault sky, and there was evening, and there was morning, the second day.
God names the vault sky Shemaim. Again, naming asserts sovereignty, defines its role. This is where the birds will fly and the stars will be set.
And standard closing refrain. But something's missing again.
Right, you are. No, God saw that it was good for day 2.
Why not?
Well, scholars suggest a few reasons. Maybe the work isn't really finished until day 3, when the land appears, completing the water space arrangement. Sailhamer, Wenham, Sarno lean this way.
Okay, that makes sense.
Or Sailhamer's idea again. Maybe nothing created just on day 2 was directly beneficial to humans yet. The vault needed the land beneath it to be truly good for us. There's also a Jewish tradition mentioned by Sarna that saw separation itself as potentially incomplete or even slightly negative, so the good comes later when things are more resolved. The goodness isn't denied, just maybe delayed until the structure is complete.
Okay, on to day 3, where that completion seems to happen. Verse 9. And God said, let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear. And it was so.
Right. Day 3 starts by dealing with the waters below the sky. God commands them to gather together, to one place, allowing the dry ground, Yabasha, to emerge.
This establishes the land and sea boundaries, crucial for a habitable world.
Absolutely. Ross and Sarna emphasize this. The command is instantly fulfilled, and it was so.
Does one place mean literally one single ocean?
Not necessarily. The notes suggest, citing Sarna and Wenham, that the verb gathered, ikwawu, means confined to specific areas, forming distinct seas and oceans. Sailhamer also connects this control over water back to God's power shown later in the Flood and Red Sea narratives.
Okay. Verse 10. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good.
Naming again. Dry ground is land area. Gathered waters are seas, yamim. God defines them, shows his authority.
Yamim is plural, suggests multiple seas.
Could be, yeah. Sarna mentions that. And Ross points out the contrast with Yam, the Canaanite sea god. Here, the seas are just God's creation, named and controlled by him, demythologized.
And the good evaluation is back.
It is. With land and water separated, a stable environment is formed, ready for life. God affirms its goodness. Sailhammer and Wenham suggest this good on day 3 might cover the work of both day 2 and day 3, the whole spatial ordering.
Okay. That makes sense in the missing good on day 2. Now, the second part of day 3, verse 11. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so.
Right after the land appears, God commands it to bring forth plant life. Let the land produce vegetation, tachareh.
Does that mean the land creates it by itself?
Not inherently. The idea, as Sarna and Wenham explain, is that God endows the land with this potential, activated by his word. Walton sees it functionally, establishing the food supply system.
And there are different categories.
Yeah, the notes mention general vegetation, smaller seed-bearing plants, and fruit trees, covering the whole range.
And the emphasis seems to be on reproduction seeds.
Absolutely vital. Seed-bearing plants, with seed in it. Gangel and Brammer and Sarna note this ensures continuity, provision, and that key phrase again, according to their various kinds, lemon no lemine.
That phrase keeps popping up
10 times in the chapter. Its stress has created order, distinct boundaries between species. Ross and Wenham emphasize this. Life reproduces reliably within its kind. Gangel and Brammer see it refuting macro-evolutionary ideas between distinct kinds.
Order and diversity within limits. And fulfilled again, and it was so.
Instantly, the earth bursts forth with plant life.
Verse 12 details that fulfillment. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good.
Exactly. It confirms verse 11 happened using a verb, wato, caused to come out, showing the land responding to God's command. And it repeats according to their kinds twice, really hammering home that principle of ordered species.
And another, God saw that it was good, the second time on day 3.
Yes. Affirming the goodness and suitability of plant life, the foundation of the food chain for animals and humans to come, Sailhammer and Ross connect this to provision.
Verse 13, and there was evening, and there was morning, the third day.
The refrain closes day 3. The basic environment is formed, sky, land, seas, and the first form of life, vegetation, is in place. Stage set for filling.
Okay, day 4, we shift to filling the heavens, verse 14. And God said, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate day from night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years."
Right. Day 4 starts the filling phase, corresponding back to day 1's creation of light darkness. God commands lights meshurch to be placed in the vault of the sky, Rakia Hashemayim. These are the sun, moon, and stars, as verse 16 clarifies.
And putting them on day 4, after light and plants, that seems deliberate.
Very deliberate. Scholars like Ross, Wenham, Sarna see this as a strong polemic against sun, moon, and star worship, which was rampant in the ancient world, Genesis says. They're not gods, they're created things, mere lights made by God for a purpose.
Just functional objects.
Pretty much. Walton even notes the word meshurt is used for tabernacle lamps, hinting maybe at the cosmos as God's temple, with these as functional fixtures.
And their functions are listed right here.
Yes, very clearly. First, to separate day from night, governing the cycle established on day 1. Second, to serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years.
Calendrical and religious functions.
Exactly. Signs aren't astrological omens here, Wenham and Sarna stress, but indicators of God's order, maybe even his actions. Sacred times, modium, refers to appointed times, festivals, aligning the cosmos with Israel's worship calendar, as Walton emphasizes, and of course marking regular days and years. This implicitly critiques pagan star worship.
Verse 15, and let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth. And it was so.
Reiterates their function, illuminating the earth, essential for life, and maybe explains the source of ongoing light after day 1, fulfillment confirmed.
Verse 16 gives more detail. God made the 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars.
Here God acts using Aisha made. Sun and moon are called 2 great lights. Significantly, the text avoids their common names, Shemesh and Yera.
Why avoid the names?
Again, demythologizing. Ross, Wenham, Sarna explain that Shemish and Uriah were associated with sun and moon deities in surrounding cultures. Genesis strips them of that status, calling them just lights defined by their God-given function.
And their function is governing.
Yes, greater light to govern the day, lesser light to govern the night. Their rule, Mavulet, is assigned by God. They're his instruments for temporal order.
And the stars are almost an afterthought. He also made the stars.
Seems that way, doesn't it? Wenham and Sarna suggest this might show their secondary importance relative to Earth's cycles, but crucially it asserts God made all celestial bodies, countering astrology. They're just part of his creation.
Verse 17. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth.
God places them not set or placed. It emphasizes God's deliberate sovereign arrangement. They're exactly where he intended them to be for their purpose.
Verse 18. To govern the day and the night and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good.
Summarizes their functions again: governing, separating, maintaining the order established on day 1.
And finally, the good evaluation for day 4.
Yes, the celestial bodies and their functions are perfect, purposeful, approved by God.
Verse 19. And there was evening and there was morning the 4th day.
Standard refrain: the celestial realm is filled and functional, ready for the next stage.
Day 5. Filling the waters in the sky. Verse 20. And God said, let the waters teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky.
Day 5 fills the realms prepared on days 2, sky, and 3, seas. God commands aquatic and avian life. Let the waters teem, yijir hamayim shirda. That verb jura means swarm, teem, suggesting incredible abundance.
And living creatures, nepetreia. That sounds important.
It is. Literally living soul or animate life. It's the first time it's used. It distinguishes animals from plants, signifies conscious, mobile existence. Ross and Walkway highlight this.
So a different kind of life than plants. And birds fill the sky.
Let birds fly across the vault of the sky. Birds fill the airspace created on day 2. Creating fish and birds together is a common pairing, the notes mention.
Verse 21 describes the execution. So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing that moves, with which the waters teem, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good.
God acts. So God created Weichem. Notice the verb bara is back.
Ah, the special verb for divine creation.
Exactly. Used for the creation of the cosmos, 1.1, now for animal life, niptraya, and later for humans. It marks a significant new stage, a different kind of life.
And it specifically mentions the great creatures of the sea, tenenim, sea monsters.
Often translated that way. Or whales, large sea creatures. Sarna and Sailhammer suggest they're mentioned specifically, again, possibly as a polemic. In other myths, these creatures symbolized chaos or were gods. Here, just part of God's creation under his control.
No big deal for God, and according to their kinds, again, for both fish and birds.
Yes, emphasizing the ordered diversity within these life forms. Every living thing that moves, every winged bird, all classified according to its kind.
And God saw that it was good.
Divine approval for these new animate forms of life, adding vitality and diversity to the world.
Then verse 2 adds something new, a blessing.
Yes. The first explicit blessing, Barak in Genesis. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the waters in the seas and let the birds increase on the earth.
What does the blessing do?
It confers the power of fertility proliferation. Westerman, Wenham, Sarna explain it's a divine endowment enabling them to fulfill their purpose, multiply, and fill their realms. Waltke notes the sound link between Barak and Barak, bless creation and blessing intrinsically linked.
And the command is, be fruitful and increase, peru uritu.
That famous phrase expresses abundant life, growth. They're commanded to populate their domains. This theme of blessing and fruitfulness is central to Genesis.
Verse 23, and there was evening and there was morning, the 5th day.
Refrain closes day 5. Water and sky are filled with diverse, blessed animal life.
Finally, day 6. First, the land animals. Verse 24, and God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds. The livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so.
Day 6 fills the land realm prepared on day 3. Let the land produce living creatures. Nepisaya again. Similar to the plants, God commands the land to bring them forth.
Suggesting their origin from the earth.
Yes, their terrestrial origin. Westerman and Wenham note the verb form yabba, cause to come out, showing the land's responsiveness. However, Sailhamer points out, verse 25 says, God made them, maybe implying a more direct divine action than with plants.
Okay. And the categories are familiar types.
Right. Livestock, behemoth domesticated. Creatures that move along the ground, immense, small, creeping, swarming things. And wild animals, they add hurry wild beasts. And of course, according to their kinds.
Order established and fulfilled. And it was so.
Command given, ready for execution.
Verse 25. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good.
God made Osha, God's direct action in forming them. Sailhamer and Sarna note this. The repetition of according to their kinds 3 times here really drives home the ordered diversity.
And the approval. God saw that it was good.
Yes, land animals are approved. The notes mention they aren't explicitly blessed here, like the fish and birds were. Maybe the blessing on humans covers them. Or it's implied since they are nepaye. Wenham raises this. But this completes the animal creation, setting the stage for the absolute pinnacle, humanity, later on day 6.
Wow. Okay, we've walked through the creation days verse by verse, but our notes also highlight some really thought-provoking ways scholars interpret the bigger picture here, maybe challenging some common assumptions. What are some of those unique insights that stand out?
Well, one of the most significant, and for some maybe challenging perspectives mentioned, comes from John Walton. He argues pretty strongly that Genesis 1 isn't primarily about material origins, God making physical stuff out of nothing during those 7 days. He sees it as an account of functional origins.
Functional origins. Okay, what does that mean exactly? How is that different?
Basically, Walton suggests God is organizing the cosmos, assigning functions, roles, purposes. Think of it like a tunker commissioning a temple. The building might exist, but the dedication ceremony assigns functions to the rooms, installs the priests, sets up the rituals, makes it operational.
So God isn't necessarily making the raw materials in the 6 days, but he's setting up how everything works.
That's the idea. He suggests the material universe might have existed in that tuhuwabu state before day 1, which he sees as non-functional, not chaotic evil. And Bereshit, in the beginning, might refer to that initial material creation phase. Then the 7 days are God establishing the functions, like time, weather, food cycles, and installing the functionaries, sun, moon, plants, animals, within that structure.
And the 7th day, God's rest.
Walton sees that as God taking up residence in his newly ordered cosmic temple, signifying his sovereign control is established and the system is running as intended. Not fatigue, but enthronement, if you like.
A cosmic temple inauguration. That's a very different way to read it. It puts the focus on order and purpose, not just material stuff.
Exactly. It tries to read Genesis 1 through ancient Near Eastern eyes, where function and order were often the point of creation stories, rather than through our modern scientific lens focused purely on material origins.
So the main question isn't, how did the atoms get here? But how did the cosmos become God's well-ordered, functioning home, ready for life and worship?
That's a good way to put it, yeah. And this perspective helps with things like, well, the light before the sun.
Right. How does that fit?
In Walton's view, day 1 establishes the function of time based on light-darkness cycles. Day 4 installs the functionaries, sun, moon, stars, to govern that already established function.
Makes sense functionally. What about other views on the light? Sailhamer.
Sailhamer offers a different approach, more focused on material but still interesting. He suggests maybe the sun, moon, stars were created materially in the beginning. That Beresh period he sees potentially is much longer. Then day 4 isn't their creation, but their assignment of function and maybe their appearance from Earth's perspective. Perhaps the initial atmosphere was hazy, and on day 4 they became clearly visible to fulfill their roles.
So again, the focus shifts to function and purpose, even if the material timing is understood differently. It's not just a scientific puzzle.
Right. It's about God establishing order. And speaking of purpose, Sailhamer's take on it was good is also really insightful.
You mentioned he sees it as beneficial for humanity.
Yes. He links God's evaluation directly to his ultimate purpose for people. Why was day 2 maybe not called good? Because the sky alone wasn't directly beneficial until the land appeared on day 3. Once the land was there, that was good. Then vegetation, food, also good. It's a strongly anthropocentric reading.
Wow, so creation isn't just good in some abstract sense, but specifically good for us in preparation for us.
That's his argument. It really highlights how creation is woven together with God's plan for humanity. And finally, the sheer artistry. Wenham, Sarna, Ross all emphasize the literary structure.
The patterns, the refrains, the numbers,
Yeah.
especially 7.
Exactly. 7 good statements, 7 fulfillment formulas, 10 divine speeches, 10 according to their kinds. Sarna says this isn't accidental. 7 signifies completion, perfection, design.
It feels very deliberate, very ordered.
It is. Monrad even talks about the sober monotony of the style, but argues it actually emphasizes the objective truth of it all by avoiding, flowery poetry. It's stating facts of faith. The structure itself proclaims the order and perfection of God's work. It's incredibly sophisticated literature.
These perspectives really do add layers, don't they?
Yeah.
Moving beyond just the surface text to see the theological depth, the cultural context, the literary genius, it's much richer. Okay, so we've explored the text, looked at some deeper scholarly insights. Now, let's bring it home. What are the core messages here for us today, especially thinking about ministry, teaching, pastoral care? What guidance or reminders can we draw from Genesis 1.125?
Well, the most immediate, powerful takeaway has to be God's absolute sovereignty and power. I mean, it just leaps off the page. God speaks and worlds come into being effortlessly.
Right. Order out of formlessness and emptiness. That sheer power should inspire awe. How does that translate practically?
Gaingel and Bramer and Hughes, in our notes, really stress living in awe of that power, leading to trust and submission. For pastors, proclaiming God's sovereignty is foundational. When life feels chaotic, when the world seems out of control, remembering the God who ordered the cosmos is still in control. That offers huge comfort.
That's vital, especially when people are facing uncertainty or hardship. Walton adds that God bringing order demonstrates his planning.
Yeah.
We can trust he's working purposefully in our lives too.
Exactly. Even when it looks like chaos to us. Another huge point is the value of creation itself.
God declared it good repeatedly.
7 times. That's not just descriptive. It's a call for us to value it, care for it as stewards. Wenham and Ross emphasize this. Recognizing creation as God's handiwork, revealing his glory, as Romans 1 says, well, that impacts how we treat the environment, how we teach about creation care. It's part of our worship.
And flowing from that, our unique place within creation.
Crucial. We're made in God's image that comes right after our section, but it's the climax day 6 points too. That gives humanity unique dignity, value, and responsibility to represent God and manage his creation. Waltak, Ross, Gaingel, and Bramer all hit this hard.
How does that shape ministry?
Profoundly. It shapes how we view every single person as an image bearer, demanding dignity and respect. It grounds our understanding of human equality and responsibility. It gives purpose. Walton and Bethencourt mention our lives have meaning in God's plan, reflecting him. That's essential for pastoral care, for teaching ethics, for everything.
Valuing creation, valuing humanity as image bearers. What about the method God used, his word?
Yes, and God said, just as his spoken word created the universe, his word today, the scriptures, has that same transformative power. Hughes and Ross make this connection.
So for believers, cherish and obey the Bible. For ministers,
It underscores the centrality of preaching and teaching God's word. We're handling the same powerful word that created everything. It can create faith, change lives, build the church. It's living and active.
and the notes also mention the separations God made. Light, dark, land, sea, kinds of creatures.
Right. Gaingel and Bramer and Wenham point out this reminds us God is a God of order and boundaries. We need to recognize and respect the distinctions he's established, both in creation and his moral law. That applies to teaching on ethics, relationships, discerning truth from error.
And lastly, the whole pattern of the week, work and rest.
Leading to worship, yeah. The creation account structure, culminating in God's Sabbath rest, sets a paradigm. Wenham, Hughes, Roth highlight this. We need that rhythm of work, rest, worship, reflection.
A reminder for ministers not to burn out and a teaching point for congregations.
Both. We need Sabbath personally, and we need to guide people into that healthy, God-honoring rhythm that acknowledges him as the source of everything. And Waltman and Sarna add, just looking at the majesty of creation itself should drive us to worship the Creator.
What an incredible journey through just these first 25 verses. It's so much more than a simple story. It's this profound statement about who God is, his power, his purpose.
Absolutely. We saw God declared as the sovereign creator, right, in verse 1, the earth initially formless and empty, but under his Spirit's presence in verse 2, and then his mighty ordering work through the first 5 days, separating, forming, naming, filling.
creating through his word, calling it all good, establishing order with things according to their kinds.
And we touched on those fascinating scholarly ideas, Walton's functional origins and cosmic temple view, Sailhamer's take on Beroshit and good, the demythologizing aspect, the literary artistry.
And the powerful reminders for us, God's sovereignty giving us trust in chaos, the value of his creation calling us to stewardship, human dignity as image bearers, the power of his word, the importance of order, and the call to worship and rest.
It really lays the foundation for everything else, doesn't it?
Right. As we wrap up, here's something to reflect on this week, especially in your own context. Given how Genesis 1 emphasizes God bringing order, function, and fullness out of that initial formless and empty dark state, how might that pattern shape how you approach situations that feel chaotic, empty, or disordered, whether it's in someone's life, a community issue, or even broader societal problems?
Yeah, really think about that. The same God who hovered over the deep, spoke light into darkness, separated land from sea, commanded life. He's present and active today. He hasn't stopped bringing order from disorder, purpose from emptiness. How does knowing his modus operandi, his way of working right from the beginning, inform how you minister, how you preach hope, how you guide people, how you tackle seemingly impossible problems? Consider how his creative, ordering power through his word and spirit is still at work, transforming and renewing.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Genesis 1.1205. We hope it's enriched your understanding.
And maybe given you some fresh perspectives and practical points for your life and ministry. We look forward to exploring more of Scripture together with you next time.